Good day, my friends. I knew you would come back today. Few things attract as much female attention as breast cancer, and that's our topic for today. You know me as Menopause Taylor, the gynecologist who is determined to give you the menopause education you deserve. There is so much distortion and chaos in the world of menopause, and even more in the world of breast cancer. So I just deliver a completely unbiased, real education on all things menopause. I have no product to sell you and no angle to push on you. I just tell you the whole truth and the whole story. What you do with the information is entirely up to you. So this is video number 364. It is the 9th video in our unit on breast cancer. And it will address breast cancer statistics. But I'll make it more interesting than just pure statistics. Of that, you can be sure. Chapter 30 is the breast cancer chapter in both editions of my book, first and second. And while I do include some statistics, I do not do so to the same extent that I will in this video. So, I know you hear a lot about breast cancer from your friends, the media, people who are trying to scare you away from HRT, you name it. Everybody has something to say about breast cancer these days. But how much do they really know about it? How much do you really know about it? Are you aware of the actual statistics on breast cancer? Or are you a victim of sound bites and media hype? I mean, you would think that with everybody talking so much about breast cancer, people would know actual facts about it. But I find that such is definitely not the case. Quite the opposite, in fact. Instead of actual statistics on breast cancer, most people know only a tidbit or two. And most people's entire repertoire of knowledge comes from the handful of women they know who have had breast cancer. So instead of any statistics whatsoever, all they really have are a few testimonials. And no matter how many testimonials you have, they will never, ever substitute for actual statistics. But regardless of how little they know, most people sure have a lot of fear over the tidbit or two that they do know. You see, I want you to know the facts. I want you to manage your menopause with facts, not fear. So to get a better feel for how much you really know about breast cancer statistics, let's just begin with a quiz question. Which of the following represents accurate statistics on breast cancer? A. Breast cancer is the most deadly cancer for women. B. Compared to endometrial uterine cancer and cervical cancer, breast cancer has the worst 5-year survival rates. C. Breast cancer is one of the most difficult cancers to diagnose using screening tests. D. Breast cancer is less common in women than endometrial uterine cancer. E. Breast cancer is one of the least successfully treated cancers. F. Breast cancer is one of the few cancers for which we know the precise cause. G. All of the above. H. None of the above. I. A, C, and E above. J, B, D, and F above. Did you find yourself stumped, or did you breeze through the quiz question feeling certain that your answer is correct? Did you have to guess at some of the options? Well, here's the quiz question with the answer in bold. How does that strike you? Are you surprised? Well, now it's time to learn the facts. The bottom line is that breast cancer is a plague. It plagues women, that would be you, mercilessly. And how does it plague you? Let me count the ways. I think breast cancer definitely wins first place for the most misunderstood cancer of all time. And in this video, I'm going to deliver a variety of actual statistics on breast cancer, and this knowledge will help you understand future videos. Now, statistics often focus on the cancer that is the most this or the most that. So let's designate those statistics for which breast cancer takes first place as the most. Let's begin with awareness. Breast cancer overshadows all other cancers when it comes to awareness. And while it's good to be aware of breast cancer, the focus on breast cancer has gotten quite out of control. It's one thing to be aware of a cancer and educated about that cancer, but it's a completely different thing to be terrorized by the cancer and think of that cancer as the boogeyman. Back in the unit on heart attack, I taught you that 1 out of 2 women dies from a heart attack, while 1 out of 29 women dies from breast cancer. And yet, there is much more focus, attention, and fear directed toward breast cancer than there is toward heart attacks. Back in the osteoporosis unit, I taught you that every woman is a sitting duck for bone loss at postmenopause. But relatively few women have a high risk for breast cancer. And yet, women fear breast cancer inordinately, but have nary a worry about osteoporosis. In the previous endometrial uterine and cervical cancer units, you learned that both endometrial uterine and cervical cancers are worse cancers than breast cancer, with lower survival rates at every stage. And yet, most women do not fear them as much as they fear breast cancer. No matter how you look at it, statistically, there is no other cancer that has ever received as much attention as breast cancer. What about media focus? Can you think of any other cancer or disease that receives as much media focus as breast cancer? Probably not, and that's because breast cancer is #1 in the media. How often do you hear about a celebrity who has breast cancer? Or even a celebrity who merely has a gene that increases her risk for breast cancer? When did a mere gene mutation that has not even manifested itself become headline news? How many celebrities do you hear about with osteoporosis or endometrial uterine cancer or cervical cancer? You see, the media is in the entertainment business. They aim for sensationalism. Very little of their coverage of matters pertaining to menopause is accurate. I think you've already realized that by getting this education. Okay, what about frequency of diagnosis? What's the most common cancer diagnosis these days? Breast cancer is currently the most common cancer diagnosis in women. But just because a cancer is the most commonly diagnosed does not necessarily mean it's as rampant as the statistic makes it sound. And this can be due to a whole host of reasons. One reason could be that there is more screening for breast cancer than there is for just about any other cancer. Few cancers have national screening programs, but breast cancer does. Another factor could be that because of the frenzy of fear surrounding breast cancer, women focus on detecting it but ignore testing for other cancers. So women are more likely to get a mammogram than a pap smear. This has the cumulative effect of citing more cases of breast cancer than other cancers, but it has nothing to do with the true incidence of various cancers. It's due to more screening for one than for others. It could be that diagnosing breast cancer is easier than diagnosing various other cancers. Why? because of the inordinate attention given to developing screening tests for it. Instead of having just one screening test for breast cancer, there are a bunch. Guess how many there are? Not one, not two, not three, but 8. 8 different screening tests for breast cancer. That's just shocking. Think of all the cancers and diseases for which there is no screening test at all. And breast cancer has 8. That shows you where the money goes. Yet another reason could be that pre-cancers are labeled as cancers and designate a finding as cancer when they are not yet cancers. This constitutes a huge stretch of the truth. If you designate a pre-cancer as a cancer, it increases the incidence tremendously, but artificially. It qualifies as an over-diagnosis. That's when you label something with a diagnosis that is worse than the actual diagnosis. In other words, it's the most over-diagnosed cancer. As I've taught you in the last 2 videos, that is definitely the case with breast cancer. Imagine counting all the women who have had cervical dysplasia as having had cervical cancer. That would make the statistic for cervical cancer skyrocket. The number of women who have had cervical dysplasia is enormous. You might be one of them. You might then become part of that overinflated statistic. So if the statistics for how common breast cancer is includes all the women who have had the in situ diseases as well as the invasive cases, it hikes the number up tremendously. So breast cancer's prize for the most common cancer diagnosis derives from 5 other mosts. Most screened cancer, most easily screened cancer, most screened cancer while ignoring other cancers, most screening tests available, 8 to be exact, and most pre-cancers diagnosed as cancers. Breast cancer is also the most funded cancer. There are more foundations, charities, societies, fundraising events, runs, and walks for breast cancer than there are for any other cancer. This goes hand in hand with the fact that breast cancer gets the most attention from both the public and the media. But ironically, despite all this focus on breast cancer, it's also in first place as the cancer that is the most confusing as to its cause. You would think that all the attention, diagnoses, screening tests, and funding would have resulted in discovering the cause of breast cancer. But it hasn't. In fact, it's made it more confusing. And all that confusion has led to extreme distortions in the world of breast cancer. That contributes to its designation as the most misunderstood cancer of all time. It turns out that there is so much focus on things that have been proven not to cause breast cancer that nobody is looking to pinpoint the thing or things that do cause it. It's like we're in quicksand, unable to break free of a distorted perception. You saw this same phenomenon with the blaming of fat for heart attacks when sugar was and still is just as culpable or more culpable. And even though the actual cause of breast cancer is unknown, it is also the most over-treated cancer. Now, that may be precisely because the actual cause is unknown, or it might be due to fear. And because of all the over-treatment, breast cancer is also one of the most curable cancers. Despite all the fear of breast cancer, the cure rates are completely inconsistent with that fear. You would expect pancreatic cancer or glioblastoma of the brain to generate the fear directed toward breast cancer, because those two cancers are uniformly fatal in just a matter of about 6 months. But breast cancer survival rates are some of the very best of all cancers. Breast cancer also has first place as the cancer for which most physicians and patients are misinformed. Doctors make what they think are statements of fact that have never been proven as fact. Patients perpetuate myths that are not even close to the truth. And the cycle of falsehoods just keeps going round and round and round, gathering steam. Nobody bothers to look around and say, wait a minute, none of this makes sense. You've seen the same kind of situation with regard to menopause itself. You've also seen it with regard to HRT. Women are just miserable with obvious symptoms of estrogen deficiency, and doctors fail to notice the pattern. Patients themselves are struggling daily with obvious symptoms of menopause, and they fail to acknowledge it for what it is. It's as if a certain mindset puts everyone's brain in a vice. And that brings us to the next characteristic for which breast cancer is at the top of the list. Breast cancer is the most common disease that induces women to choose the worst management for their menopause. And that's not limited to just women who have had breast cancer themselves. It includes women who have a genetic mutation that just puts them at higher risk for breast cancer. It includes women who have a near or distant relative who have had breast cancer. It includes women who merely know someone who had breast cancer. It even includes women who have no reason whatsoever to focus on breast cancer. I call this the spillover effect. Fear of breast cancer spills over and affects women who should not be fearful. Yep, breast cancer gets first place as the driver of decisions on menopause management. And it drives those decisions in ways that impair women's quality of life and artificially robs them of management options that are available to them. Another way in which breast cancer is first place is in the fact that the treatment is much worse than the actual disease in the vast majority of cases. Of course, this is because breast cancer is most commonly diagnosed on mammogram when a woman has had nary a symptom. And while it's good that the diagnosis is made early, it means that the woman goes from feeling fine before the diagnosis to feeling horrible as soon as treatment begins. And there's one underlying most that is at the root of all these other features for which breast cancer is first. Breast cancer is definitely the most feared cancer. And that inordinate fear has led to the designation of breast cancer as the disease, cancer or otherwise, harboring the greatest number of misconceptions. It really is the most misunderstood cancer of all time. Now, this is not logical. This is emotional. And the reason it's not logical is that breast cancer also gets the award for being designated as the most in a way that makes so much of what I've already presented difficult to fathom. One of those is the survival rate. Breast cancer is one of the most survivable and least deadly cancers. The 5-year survival rates for breast cancer are excellent. They're better than the survival rates for endometrial uterine cancer, cervical cancer, heart attack, fractures from osteoporosis, or Alzheimer's disease. As you can see, when you stack up the statistics for which breast cancer places most, they just don't align with the level of fear generated by it. This is due to something psychologists call the availability heuristic. One of my undergraduate majors in college was psychology, and I just love being able to understand things like this based on their psychological construct. The availability heuristic is the tendency to judge the probability or severity of a disease by how easily you can think of people who have had it and how emotionally compelling it is. With all the awareness, media focus, frequent diagnoses, funding, confusion, overtreatment, and fear of breast cancer up front and center all the time, women have the misconception that breast cancer is much more of a threat than it really is. And all of this has resulted in making breast cancer the most controversial and misunderstood cancer ever. In the videos to come, you will discover that there are controversies over everything in the world of breast cancer. Its cause, the risk factors, how to screen for it, treatments, what constitutes cure, and whether breast cancer patients should or can take HRT. We'll be assessing all of these things as we get to them. I will give you a whole lot to think about. I will raise a whole lot of questions. You can supply your own answers. I'm here to make sense of things for you, not to tell you what to do. I tend to think of this whole breast cancer threat to women as Beauty and the Beast. Women are the beauties and breast cancer is the beast. But the beast isn't even close to being the demon people assume it to be. Instead, breast cancer, while a beast, is a much more gentle beast than most imagine. And it certainly doesn't warrant the fear it receives. So to summarize, statistically speaking, breast cancer is the cancer that is the most common, the most media focused, the most screened, the most easily diagnosed, the most over-diagnosed, the most funded, the most confusing as to its cause, the most over-treated, the most misinformed, the most powerful driver of menopause management, the most curable, the most feared, but the least deadly. All these things contribute to its designation as the most controversial cancer and the most misunderstood cancer. And much of this is due to the availability heuristic. So there you have it. I'll bet this was the strangest statistics lesson ever. I don't think I gave you any numerical values at all. Oh well. Join me again next week when we begin our discussion on the cause of breast cancer. Be sure to subscribe to my newsletter and my channel before leaving here today. And it would be an absolute honor for me to have a consultation with you. So go to menopausetailor.me to schedule one. And I will see you on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Stories. Bye.